Welcome to Encouragement for Living Life with Lockwood and Lockwood. The guys are here to encourage you in your attempt to live more confidently and successfully in our world. They are highly trained and experienced mental health professionals, but they are not your mental health professional. They are sharing encouragement through information and discussion. People are complex. Just because an idea helps one person doesn't mean it will help someone else. You need to consult with your own professional who will hopefully know what is best for you in your situation. Now, it's time for Lockwood and Lockwood.
All right, we're going to start with let the light in, how to take in the good and keep out the bad. And I thought the first part of what we would talk about would be the common sense approaches to help a person feel better, such as putting in the good, attitudes, thinking, things like that, and prayer, readings, meditation, and music even. I
Hmm.
thought of. There may be more you think of as we go through these things,
Sure.
but practical things that people can do to feel better, that they can do every day, multiple times a day if they need to. I
Okay. I like that.
I
Did
tell
you
let
have
me
more?
tell you let me tell you a story.
No, okay.
There's a famous, they're both out in your area, by the way. There's a famous alcoholic out there. He's now deceased.
Mm,
Told a story one time of another guy that lived out by Riverside, which is maybe even closer to you. And um, this guy he was a real intellectual, and he
mm,
thought he had all the answers to life. And so he would be critical of a lot of things in AA, right?
sure.
So this other guy came and spoke one day at his meeting before he ended up, I think, sponsoring him. And he went
Mm,
through this long talk where he put down all these things that AA does. He made fun of them in his
mm,
talk. And then at the end, he said, there's only one problem with everything I said, and that's that they work. So every slogan, every prayer, every way of looking at life that was positive,
yeah.
that this guy used to make fun of, he set him up. He went and gave that talk just for that guy. And it finally got through to that guy that, oh, maybe I should take these things seriously,
Yeah.
that they might actually help how I think and how I feel. So I never forgot that story because, those of us who are smart often think we know better than some things that are very simple and common sense. So I
Yeah.
thought we'd talk about some really helpful, simple, some not all simple, but some things that are really helpful to people to help them think better, therefore feel better, that every person can do. You want to
Yeah.
answer? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's just like a dozen things to say. So
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
the top couple that I think are the most important is you just said the phrase, think better to feel better.
Yep.
So I want to plant a flag for everyone who's listening, which is that sounds very simple, which is if you just correct your thoughts, then you will feel better, which implies that there's some active, simple thing you can do to correct your thoughts, which is true. I don't think you and I would disagree that that's true. I think we can
Right.
all
Right.
basically do
I
some
agree.
simple self-reflection or something to pay attention to what we're thinking or feeling and correct ourselves in the moment.
Right.
So the flag that I'd like to plant is, so this is a very temporary thing, right? So we were talking about, the difference between tolerating and accepting and coping, uh, 2 or whatever
Right.
episodes ago. And so this is not a tolerance building skill. This is not an acceptance building skill. This is a coping skill that you're describing, if you want to categorize it, in my opinion. Because when we're trying to correct our thoughts on the spot, that's not a long-term solution for literally anything. That's a short-term solution. That's a very short-term. That's like a 2 to 5 minute solution if you're lucky, in my experience.
Can I give an example?
Yeah, sure.
When I first got sober, I started hearing about these AA slogans
Yeah.
as an example.
Yeah.
And some of them caught my attention very quickly because it would take
Yeah.
me like an hour, 45 minutes, an hour every night to fall asleep. because my
Sure.
mind would run like a train going down the side of a mountain without brakes on, and I just couldn't slow it down or, stop it to go to sleep. It took a long time to kind of work through a bunch of stuff to go to sleep. And then I started hearing about these silly, what I would have called silly slogans too, but I grabbed
Yeah.
onto a few, like easy does it by saying
Yeah.
it to myself. And I had to sometimes say things like that to myself hundreds of times a day.
Yeah,
Let
sure.
go and let God, live and let live. Um, what else here? One day at a time,
Yeah.
think, which really means think about what's really important. Think about how you're thinking, because the way you're thinking may not be real helpful to you. That's what
Yeah.
that slogan really means.
Yeah.
So I would literally drive down the road or in my office, I guess sometimes, but mostly when I was driving. And I'd be saying these things over and over to myself. And over time, it would begin to slow that engine down that was going on inside me of what people might now call anxiety. You know what I'm saying? A general category of anxiety. And they
Hmm.
begin to really help. But this is where I know it's not simple, what you went through just a few minutes back. But I think those things alone over time, plus all the changes inside of me, I hardly don't live one day at a time. I hardly don't live more than just what's going on in front of me because I've learned that it does no good to look to the future or the past, but stay in the moment. There's an old saying in AA, if you got one eye on yesterday, one eye on tomorrow, you're cockeyed today.
Yeah.
So all these silly things that or seem silly when you first show up in life, when you start trying to grow.
Yeah.
In AA, Alcoholics Addicts Recover, they're not silly at all, but you have to repeat them a lot for them to have any kind of impact on you so that they don't become what you just said, more momentary ways of coping, but can actually begin to way you live and look at life. And they literally over time did, where I no longer or very rarely have to say, live and let live. No, I'm going to live and let live because your life is yours and mine is mine. So why wouldn't I live and let live? It becomes automatic. And I'm not saying that a lot of other things didn't have to change inside for that
Yeah.
to become part of my life. Other things had to change too, of course.
Yeah.
But living one day at a time is just my nature now. I don't think about I think about the future, make plans, but I don't dwell on the future because I know dwelling on the future increases the worst of feelings, fear, anxiety in general, whatever it might be. So if
Yeah.
you live in today, your life's going to be a whole lot better, and you're not going to be clouded by a bunch of yesterday and tomorrows, which
Yeah.
aren't here yet or are over and gone.
Yeah.
The yesterdays. Okay, so that's an example of what I'm talking about. So you're right, they're coping skills, but when you're really feeling bad, they can really take the edge off how bad you feel and
Yeah.
help you feel better, right?
Yeah. And that's the exact goal of a coping skill. The goal of a coping skill is not to permanently fix a problem. Because the reason I was planting the flag there verbally, at least,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
is I don't want anyone to ever think that this is some glib or oversimplified way of like feeling better. Because feeling better is a process and a journey.
right, right,
It's not a, it's not a like you can learn this magical insight and then all of a sudden everything is okay. It's like what you just described is
right.
exactly what I was thinking. So most people have to practice habits and coping skills for a very long period of time to develop what you and I probably would both call a new attitude, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
you develop this new attitude through lots of experience, right? So I don't want anyone to think you can just cope your way to a better life because you also have to be committed to the longer term goal of having a new attitude. You have to recognize that your
right.
prior attitude sucked. It didn't help you in the way that you wanted it to. Maybe it was there for a
Correct.
reason, right?
Oh yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
your attitude existed because it allowed you to stay in resentment and feel powerful, or maybe it allowed you to feel safe,
sure,
right?
sure.
Because you could push people away, or whatever the good reason you had that attitude that wasn't helpful. You have to be willing to try a new attitude. And that's, to me, that's the harder sell. I can sell anybody on coping skills because everyone wants to feel better for the next 2 to 5 minutes. But the idea that you have to change your attitude to have a better life, I think that's a pretty groundbreaking idea, even though people like Tony Robbins kind of do that and stuff. The problem is that no one explicitly says that, really. Like in their informed consent process, most therapists are not saying, what we're going to do is we're going to drastically alter your attitude towards life.
And outlook towards life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Most of them are
Yeah.
like, we're going to you fix your problematic thoughts. I'm going to teach you coping skills. I'm going to teach you to look at your childhood differently and blah, 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 whatever. And like, that's all good, but it's also missing the bigger picture, the practical reality of like developing a new attitude takes a bunch of time and a bunch of effort. If you have to say a phrase to yourself 100 times a day or more just to make it through that day, that's hard. Most people don't have the discipline or the desperation, depending upon how you look at it, to actually
Often
do.
both. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes both. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to me, the bigger question is, you know, do people really want an attitude change? And that's something that I would never want to coerce somebody about. Like, if you really do find your current attitude helpful, you think that it's working for you, then like, I'm not here to change that. I don't have a good
Right.
argument for you, right? If you think, just as the easy example to pick on, right? Like, if you really think resentment as a way of living is useful, that's totally cool. I'm not here to change your opinion about that. You feel empowered by it, you feel protected by it, whatever. And it's not my job to debate you or sell you on that.
Yeah, I have a great example of that. I saw this couple very briefly. I was number five therapist
Sure. Yeah.
in a line of therapists, and
Yeah.
they sat in front of me and fought. And they lasted about 2 or 3 sessions with me and went on to number six. And I thought afterwards, because I didn't know them well, but my thought was they probably stayed together through conflict. That the conflict that they fight out is their way of being close with each other, that
Yeah, it's the glue.
they know no other way of being close, so they have
Yeah.
to fight. So it's unpleasant, so they went and sought help, but it's the very thing that keeps them together.
Yeah, it's their norm.
Yeah, so here's somebody that, if they were here long enough, would have been, well, do you want to find another way to be close?
Yeah, but I think again, selling people on that's hard sometimes because not
Right,
everyone really thinks that a different way is better. Like
right,
it's
right.
like we were talking about this, I don't know when, second or third podcast, but there's something really maybe intoxicating is the wrong word. I think for some people it's certainly intoxicating. I think there's something very empowering when you're angry or resentful. I think that anger is an emotion that most people don't like because it's not pro-social or something. And resentment is a thing that's like we're entitled to it, right? And so the idea of letting go of the power you have for potentially learning a different power, right, is really, really like the best metaphor I've ever come up with, which isn't even that good in my opinion, is it's like if you really wanted to defend yourself well in life, you have a couple of choices. You can learn to fight, like learn a martial art, or you can just learn to yelp at people and scare them, right? And so if you're used to yelling, learning a martial art takes a long time. Like becoming a black belt in jujitsu or karate or something takes years. And so
Hmm.
spending
Right.
years of practicing and getting beat up and learning skills and new types of discipline, it's just not as easy as just like yelling at people.
Well, I was saying about anger and yelling. It only takes seconds to yell. It takes minutes, hours, and days to actually be involved the right way in a relationship instead of
But
yelling. But
it can take,
you're describing something else that's much more complicated. But you're right. People need to hear what you're saying. People have to have a choice. Do you want to do the work to really change the attitude for the long run? Or do you want to just get through a day or part of a day?
yeah,
By practicing some of the things that we're going to talk about today,
yeah,
for
yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
For sure. I did. I think a lot of guys I knew did. They wanted to learn a different way to live because we can't just stop drinking or using. or you're just one miserable son of a gun and you're going to go back and use and drink again if you
Sure.
don't change the man who you are. So where I grew up in recovery many moons ago, you got to change the man you are,
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's why I want to go through some of these today because they really do
Yeah.
help and they can become part of people's lives if they really commit to applying them, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have patients that when they were kids read books on positive thinking because they were in such a miserable situation, they knew there's a better way.
Yeah.
And they just dove into all kinds of stuff like that that helped them cope and not just survive, but actually cope and flourish in some ways,
Nice.
Yeah, great example. So thinking, attitude, like you say, positive thinking. I also have prayer,
Mm.
that prayer can help. I would go over with a patient recently, the Serenity Prayer. He's new and in recovery, and it's like doesn't understand I can't control everything. He's young, you know. So I can't control everything, getting frustrated at work. And I'm going like, well, have you ever heard of the serenity prayer? God grant me the
Mm.
serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and that real important one, wisdom to know the difference.
Mm.
So he recently tried applying, I can't control everything, it's okay to let it go. And he was much less exhausted.
Yeah.
He felt less tired because he actually let go of trying to change the job situation in people he couldn't control, his boss.
Sure. Sure.
Boss's boss. He couldn't
Yeah.
control them,
Sure.
and getting frustrated. So you also can do things like that. And then in my case, I believe in the power of prayer, which to me means that God is real and God has power, and we have access to that power through God, and that He really can change things that we cannot change. You know my story, with
Mm.
that. And there's no way that a mind like mine could have had peace when I had peace that night that God showed up in that bedroom of mine in graduate school. There's no way. And that was no orchestrated spiritual experience, personality change. It was, wow, some presence was there and totally changed the way I thought about everything. Everything calmed down. I just felt peace for probably, by the way, for the first time in my life.
Mhm.
My
Yeah.
life. So those of us who believe in the power of God, there's a lot of stuff people can do. You can read scripture, you can read daily meditation books, which we'll get down to meditation too, and you can listen to positive music. I used to listen. I joke with people, I still cannot listen to Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. I used to sit there depressed in college listening to that damn song. Now it just grosses me out to even hear it reminds me how frickin' depressed I was, which I didn't know at the time. But anyway,
Mm.
so I try to listen to music that's more positive. A lot of
Sure.
people in recovery, like you listen to rap because they're pissed off, and they want power and as they get some recovery, they often change the kind of rap they listen to more positive rap as an
Mm.
example. So even music can have an influence on how we think and how we feel.
Yeah.
So some of it conscious, some of it not conscious, and real important to me, what I
Yeah.
listen to, you know. And then there's readings, another area, the daily meditation books, the readings people do that I believe put in the good. Again, you can't, it's not just you're going to read it once and it may make sense to you, may not even make sense to you. But if it makes sense to you, you go, that's a good concept. But
Yeah.
then you have to hear it over and over and over again. I used to never understand why. I knew why alcoholics went to meetings on an ongoing basis. It took me a while to figure out why people went to church who weren't alcoholic on an ongoing basis, because they
Mm.
need reminders of the things that work and the things that don't work. Because we're all human beings, we all forget. That, oh, forgiveness is important. Oh, living one day at a time is important. Oh, be the borrower, not the lender, or be the lender, not the borrower. We got to hear these things over and over again to remind us what works in life and what doesn't. And when it works, what I call works, helps you feel better and live better,
Yeah.
which has positive results too, because we're talking today about what gives you more of the positive. So I learned a whole lot of what you cognitive behavioral people, I got that from AA. I got that from church. I got that from the books I read, the meditations, what I call meditations. I don't meditate like some people. I meditate on something positive that I read from God, or some principle that's not indirectly, a principle that would be godly principle. I put in the good. And every day I do quite a lot of it before I get to work, to
Mm,
make sure that I start the day out the right way. I know the values, so my reading's gone up from one or two things to probably five or six things every morning. And it's been like that for decades now.
mm,
It really helps remind you of the things that are important, which
mhm.
human beings easily forget,
Yeah.
or the world can wear away at you because of the things that come from the world. And we'll talk about that in the next section on keeping out the bad. But before we do that, any other thoughts about putting in the good?
Yeah. I mean, everything you listed sounds useful. I've recommended similar things to people over time. I
Sure.
think one that you didn't talk about a whole lot explicitly is
Yeah.
gratitude. And
Oh,
so
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
for me, I mean, obviously, in the recovery world, people use gratitude lists, and some programs and cultures have you send a gratitude list every day. And
Right.
I think that's okay. I think the problem I have with like the gratitude list exercise is that it becomes more of a habit that you don't have to put a whole lot of effort into if you're not really trying. So the variation of that I usually like for people is to have a gratitude conversation once a
There
day.
you go. There you go. Yeah.
Because, once you're actually having to say things out loud to people and not just send like a copy and pasted text message to 10 different people that supposedly care about you, um, if you're actually expressing it, it's true. It's true. You know?
I know. I know.
So like if you make it more real, if you make it more personal and you have to say the words out loud and hear yourself say them, if you're full of shit and it's not the truth and you're just doing it to, satisfy your therapist, your counselor, your sponsor, your friends, your pastor, whatever, then like you're going to take note of that. You're going to take note. It's going to shock you how often you're faking gratitude. And that should be concerning to everyone because unless you're abysmally poor or dying of horrific illnesses right now or in a war-torn part of the country, your life is better than 99.9% of people who have literally ever lived.
Now, there you hit on another thing that fits in here perfectly, which is perspective. You could call it attitude, but perspective that, yeah, you're suffering because you don't have X. Well, compared to the rest of the world, you've got 100 times what they've got.
At least.
And that, yeah, well, in a lot of cases, many, many more times than what
Yeah.
they have. So
Yeah.
in America, we have reason to be grateful every day that we're in America,
Yeah.
for sure. And that kind of stuff, that kind of perspective, you only get when you're hanging around people that feel that way, or you're reading stuff, or you're getting reminders of that. Like you're just saying, we're reminding people right now that may already know a lot of the things we're talking about, but do they need to hear it again? Yeah, because they're human. I need to hear it again.
Yeah. I think we all do. And I think we need
Right.
reminders. And so that's the thing that like the reason I wanted to make a specific pitch about gratitude and especially having like a
Yeah.
gratitude conversation is because we need reminders. Like, so of the
Amen.
selfish things that we can do, and there are many of them that are more just for us. To me, the reason I like, having a gratitude conversation as a more simple coping skill is because it's always equally beneficial for the other person. So it's not the most selfish, it's the most pro-social coping skill that I can think of because everyone needs a reminder, even if they're not going to get the reminder when you say it to them, you're putting it in the world that this is an important perspective. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, also, like, you don't deserve to be miserable. whatever you learned as a kid, whatever you learned from the world, your professors, your friends, your whatever. Like people, for some reason, or for dozens of reasons, usually, learn
Yes.
that they deserve to feel miserable.
Hmm.
And something that gratitude teaches you is that the opposite is actually true.
Good point. Good
You
point.
know?
I remember when I heard the term, and I actually had gratitude at the top of my list and didn't see it. So right on to bring that up,
Yeah.
and yes, absolutely. Our perspective on our situation can cause us to feel good or bad,
Yeah.
depending on what our perspective, what we're focusing on. I remember the first time I heard the slogan, suffering is optional. Of
Yep.
course, I perked up because it intuitively made sense.
Hmm.
And you know how I feel about helplessness, you know, not a big fan of helplessness,
True.
because it causes so many problems. But anyway, so if suffering is optional, then there are things you can do to mitigate, lessen suffering and increase the good. So that's the first part of this. Now, I wanted to also try to look at it two ways that are interrelated, obviously, but the second part was keeping out the bad.
Yeah.
And the first thing, of course, I thought of is all media. That was the first thing that came to mind when I went down this. I went, as an two things that media will saturate your mind with if you listen to news. Some shows, to other shows, fear, if you listen to most any reporting about the world. It's inundated with fear, and it isn't just you hear it for 10 minutes and then the rest of your day is filled with more neutral or positive things. People stay online for hours and
Hmm.
become inundated with fear. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid.
Yeah.
Or in the
Yeah.
second area is they're hearing a lot of anger. I'm
Yep.
angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. Everybody's angry at each other and calling each other names and all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
both of these things pollute the mind with what I call negative, not the good. These are not the good things. We can hear the reality about situations very easily, but that's not how news is presented anymore. It's not presented, well, they believe this and they believe that. This seems to have these consequences. This seems to have that We don't hear that. It's all personality driven and
Yeah.
emotion driven. And people miss out on the content, or you don't even hear content to evaluate yourself. Because somebody somewhere figured something out that's very much, and you can speak to this better than I can, brain chemistry, that negative introjects, negative words, we'll say in this case, have a powerful impact on the brain. It takes many positives to equal one negative. Is that not correct?
Basically. Yeah.
In the brain? So if you're hearing fear, you're hearing anger, constantly, your mind, and it works because the powerful introject will have an impact on you. So some
Yeah.
groups of people want to use that to control you,
Yeah.
which makes sense that they learn a simple logarithm, make them afraid that'll stick real strongly, and then they're more likely then to look to me or look to us for some solution. Okay. So they learned a principle, but in the past, the principle was let's try and focus on the good in life, so we can all feel better because that doesn't make you feel better. That makes you feel more anxious. And
Yeah.
that's the opposite of feeling positive and good. So
Yeah.
media is the first thing I thought of. And because they know how now to make money that way, they know how to get people clicks and looks, which makes them money. They're not backing off the fear and they're not backing off the anger because it gets them clicks and looks. It works
Yeah.
for them and they make money to the detriment of millions and millions of people who then have more fear and anger in them, which means more anxiety or depression
Yeah.
or whatever that doesn't feel good. So any comments on media?
I mean, I probably have a lot to say, but for the sake
Yeah.
of time, I think
Yeah.
I I've never met anyone whose life was infinitely better just because of the news or most types of social media. I think
Uh-huh.
the best thing for everyone is to never read the news, listen to the news, or anything like that ever again. You know, typically our kind don't give advice. I think if I were to give anybody and everybody
Right.
advice, it's never listen to the news ever again. I don't care what your beliefs are. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care
Right.
what part of the
Right.
world you're from. If you're listening to this podcast, just shut that junk off because it's junk.
It is. It really is. It makes some people a lot of money or gives some people power, but
Yeah.
that doesn't help you. That
Yeah.
makes you miserable each day.
And why do you want people to profit off of your misery? And why do you want people to have power over you?
Right on.
You
Right on,
know,
son. You bet. Well said. Well, number two is watch your words. The
this
power of words,
is your
which is
favorite.
a whole big area for everyone.
Hmm.
Words have power. Older I get, the more I realize how much power words have, both
Hmm.
the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So acknowledging someone, encouraging someone, not gossiping,
Mm.
building people up, seeing them for who they are. There's all kinds of powerful words that we can use with each other that help others and us as we're doing it feel good. It doesn't mean we always feel good saying it. We all have conflicts, all kind of stuff going on. But I'm talking about in general, to build up the good is how you use your words. So instead of
Mm.
being critical, be kind or be uplifting, build them up.
Uh,
I teach my patients, like, if someone's really tooting their own horn a lot, well, they have a problem because no one ever acknowledged them or was proud
mm.
of them or admired them. And
Mm.
I try and help them see that they're not bad. They just have a big deficit in their self-worth. So they're
Sure.
actually tooting their own horn. And we all can do it, and slip with that kind of stuff. I'm saying, I did in the hall earlier. A guy saying, "Hey, I want to introduce myself," because they see your mom and I walking in the neighborhood. He lives in the neighborhood also. He's a financial guy. And he wanted to introduce it and I said, "Yeah, I've been here about 40 years." I don't know why I had to tell him that. My ego, is a little, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so easy to do, with people, but not necessary. And I'm sure he may have gone right past him or whatever. But anyway, but I notice those things, as you're aware of, even myself, at times. But anyway, but words are super important. So to be encouraging, positive with people, it comes back to you. And is it good to be around a bunch of people that are negative all the time? Is that healthy for you? Because there are groups of people that live in the fear, live in the anger. And what does that do with you if you're bumming around with them and listening to them and talking to them on the phone all the time? You're letting the bad in, not the good in. Be around people that want to see the good. That want to, I have friends that they get negative. I'll just say, well, you know what? We have a lot to be grateful for, and it'll change them immediately because they know that, because they've been around long enough and grown enough to go, all right, I'm dwelling on the bad again. You know, so let's try and dwell on the good. You put good in. I call it letting the light in. That's why I kind of named this thing, "Let the Light In." Light gets rid of darkness. Now, I know
Yeah.
not perfectly, like you said, coping versus internalizing, etc., but it helps. And if you do it consistently, it can build a different way of living life. Your words are very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Words are very powerful. I think we often struggle to recognize just how powerful they are, even in
Oh, yeah.
passing. The thing about dwelling, right? Because dwelling is like a place you live, right? So
I guess, in a way, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the dictionary definition.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
so, yeah. So my 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 struggle is, although I do agree with you in spirit about what you're saying, in principle, I think it's hard to do this because two different things showed up in my mind while you were talking.
Yeah.
One is, the fine art of living, right? Dwelling. I think that there's a reality for everyone, whether they have a diagnosable mental illness like schizophrenia or depression, or they don't. They're just your ordinary person. I
Right.
think there's a balancing act that's very hard for people, or at least this is the metaphor I think of. So many people that don't feel important or don't have a history of getting their needs met, one of the things that allows them to start to feel better generally and grow and change is where they can speak about their struggles. And so, although I agree with you in spirit, I disagree with you practically because I want people that have not traditionally had much of a voice for whatever the reason, whether it's childhood stuff or bad relationship or your boss sucks or whatever it is, right?
Right.
If you, for some reason, don't feel like you can't speak up about the negative in your life, then part of what everyone needs to figure out how to do is to have an appropriate concern or complaint or frustration. And so, to some degree, I do want people to live there if they've grown up or learned to ignore being there, you know?
Well, you're getting more complicated now. You're right. You're exactly right because some people need to put words on things that they never could put words on before. And then again, a complicated area that we'll talk certainly more about conflict.
Yeah.
Then if they can get a voice, a strong enough voice, then can they use that voice to resolve conflict? If you then resolve a conflict, you can feel better.
Yeah, for sure. And so for
Yeah.
me, it's it's
Yeah.
it's it's not as simple as try to not deal with the negative to some degree. And I know that's not necessarily what you mean. However, I
No,
don't I
no,
don't want the
no.
average person listening to mistake what you're trying to say.
Good. Yeah,
Uh,
good. Right on.
the other thing that I thought of as well is, you know, when it comes to anger in particular, I'm definitely in a very different camp than you, I think. And I think that that's okay. I think there's a lot of people that are very afraid of anger in our profession. And I think a lot of people mistake reactive anger and righteous anger as only merely defenses. And I just don't think it's that simple. I just think that people are a little more complicated than that. And so, like,
Well, they're a lot more complicated, but you're kind of getting into the deeper stuff again. And I really didn't want to do a lot of that with this one. I
oh,
get you. I get you. We're not really in different camps. I'm just really trying to be much more practical and simple with some ideas today. We'll spend most of our time because both of us understand the complexities of people and why a simple thing like watch your words isn't that simple,
it's
but
extremely not simple. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. Or yeah, yeah. Or like who are you around? Well, there's a reason why you're around certain people,
That's right.
so there's many layers to this, but I just want to give people a flavor for
Yeah.
that. The more the good you let in, the better you can feel. Of course, making it part of who you are takes some work to do that, but I see many people are quite willing to do that. A lot of people I
Yeah.
see have already done a lot of that before they even get here, and they're here because that wasn't near enough,
Yeah.
too. So yeah,
100%.
but yeah, I think your warnings are really good because we don't want people to think that if you just go buy that book that has positive thinking, it's going to correct all the things that are going wrong in your life. It's
No.
not. It can have some significant impact on some people. It can have little on others and none on others. That's why I
Yeah.
joke about
100%.
people with shelves being loaded with self-help books that have good principles, but they haven't done a lot to change anybody's life.
Yeah, because there's not a good
Yeah,
sales pitch or it's not practical. Like I can certainly speak to the, surround yourself with more positive people piece because John and Angela and a couple of my current friends, Kenny, Dr. Scale, like all these
right,
people are inherently relatively positive people. And my life
right,
is
right.
infinitely better having been around them for all these years.
Amen.
Infinitely, infinitely,
Amen.
you
You
know?
betcha. And who do people gravitate to?
Yeah.
positive people. Now that some gravitate to the people they're not too for different reasons, but
Yeah.
I'd rather gravitate to the positive people, the people that have some good words to share with people,
Yeah.
things like that. So we just want to give you a flavor for some practical things that may help you in your day-to-day, moment-to-moment living that many of can become part of your life if you are able to do the work to make them part of your life.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's it for this podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Hmm.
Thanks for listening to Encouragement for Living Life. We hope you were encouraged by today's discussion. If you have a question, you can email us at lockwoodwithlockwood@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer it on one of our shows. Hope to see you next time.